Welcome. This is Ashley with Nell and Joe Crafts, and I am going to show you how to get your fabric in your hoop today, and then how to trace your pattern on that fabric so that you can be ready to start stitching. Now, the things I'm going to show you today can work with any hoop size, any fabric size, any pattern. What I'm using today is an 8-inch hoop and an 11-inch square of fabric. And then I'm going to be using my Whimsical Flowers pattern. And then I will talk about my pen and other tools when we get closer there. If you are just starting embroidery, I like to have my fabric square be about 3 inches bigger than the hoop size. So this hoop is 8 inches. And so then I have 11 inches of fabric. So I have at least an inch or more to pull and tighten my fabric on both sides. So we're gonna start by opening our hoop. So you just twist the screw gate until it starts to loosen. That's probably even too much. And then you're gonna pop the inside from the outside. Now we're gonna make a little sandwich. Hoop, fabric, and then hoop. Now you want to try and get your bottom hoop centered. You can see I'm using my fingers here. Check and make sure that I'm mostly centered. Just makes life a little bit easier. And then I'm going to pop this outer hoop back on top. Now we're going to tighten the screw gate again. And I'm just going as tight as my fingers will allow. It's starting to get tough at that point, so I'm going to stop. Now we're going to hold our hoop in one hand. I'm pinching with my finger and thumb, and then you're going to take the fabric and pull down and away, and you just work your way all the way around the hoop, pulling down and away. And you can see as I'm doing this that the wrinkles that were in my fabric to begin with have mostly all disappeared. So that's round one. Now we're going to repeat the process. I'm going to again tighten this as much as my fingers can. And then I'm just going to check again real quick. This time I'm not pulling quite as hard, just making sure to get all the wrinkles out and that I've got pretty even tension across my entire hoop. So your fabric is good in your hoop when there are no wrinkles in it and when it sounds like a drum. You want it to be drum tight. Now the final thing we're gonna do is I'm gonna use this little screwdriver. You can see here that there is a little hex head. So this would actually be better with a Phillips screwdriver, but I have a flathead. It's gonna work out just fine. Sometimes there's just a little groove, and we're gonna tighten this even more than I could with just my fingers. Because having a nice tight hoop is going to hold your fabric consistently instead of having to stop and mess with it. So I'm just going to tighten that 3-4 more good turns. And now my fabric is ready to go in my hoop. So the next step from here is that we need to trace our pattern. Now I'm going to trace today on this light table. That is by no means essential. I have also traced on a bright window is a good choice. I have traced on my computer screen, on a tablet screen, even a really bright white table works well for light colored fabrics. So for this design, if you're working from my pattern, you're gonna see down here, there are a couple notes. First thing is it's telling you that loops are chain stitches and lines are puff stitches. So you want to make sure that you're tracing those differently. Loops and straight stitches. And then we've got a dotted line right here around this kind of flower. And it says that this is just a visual guideline. So you don't actually have to trace that unless you want to. So what we're going to do, this is the front side of your hoop, right? This is the side you display on. We're going to flip it over so that when I put the hoop down on the fabric, you can see immediately that you can see those lines. Whereas when I put it down this way, we can't see the lines. So we want the fabric to be touching our paper. And I'm gonna both try and center the stitching, these lines, in my hoop and also within the fabric, so that if I got off a little bit, when we go to finish our hoop at the end, it'll just make things a little bit easier. So I feel like everything's pretty lined up here. Now at this point, if you are stitching on a window or somewhere where you have to hold your hoop rather than just letting it sit on a table, I would suggest putting a couple pieces of double stick tape around your design and then taping your design directly to your fabric, so that if you have to bring your arms down or let go for a minute, you don't have to reline up everything. When I'm just on the table here, it's less important because I can just move my hands and everything stays still. So I am tracing with a friction pen, and this is a Pilot pen, and you can see here it says it's erasable, and this is a heat erasable pen. For light fabrics, it's fabulous. For dark fabrics, less so, because it does leave a little bit of a shadow image. For embroidery, we're going to stitch on top of our lines, so it just adds a little bit of confidence, so we don't have to worry about worry about missing our lines when we are stitching. So to trace the pattern, you want to make sure that your drawing hand is comfortable. So you can see here, I've already rotated so that my right hand, my drawing hand, isn't trying to rotate in weird angles. I'm at a comfortable angle for me to draw. And I'm just going to pick a spot and start tracing. Slow and steady is the name of the game here. You can see that as I go, I'm going to rotate my hoop a lot to just any which way that feels the most comfortable for my hand. Because the more comfortable you are in tracing, the better your end embroidery will be. Because if you are fighting your hand and fighting the pattern all the time you're tracing, your lines get a little wobbly and it becomes more difficult to get everything traced. So slow and steady. And if you're using an erasable pen like I am, don't worry too much if you get off the line a little bit. Just come back, retrace it where it should be. You can see up here, I've got a little double line spot. No problems. Now, I like to think of the lines here in this pattern as guidelines. They are not the law. So you don't have to worry lots about making sure everything is exact. You're going to use your own stitching creativity as you finish your pattern, so you don't have to worry about making sure everything is perfect. The exception to that rule is if you're working with a pattern that has a lot of perfect straight lines. I have a pattern called Everything's Fine, and it has a bunch of block lettering in it. And that pattern, I actually suggest tracing with a straight edge, a little ruler of sorts, so that you can have perfect lines to then make perfect letters. Whereas this pattern is a flower pattern, and flowers are natural shapes, and they allow us to be more creative in our stitching and not have to stick exactly on the lines. So guidelines, not the law. I am going to keep tracing here, and I will check in with you in a minute. So that took me about 10 minutes or so to trace that. And if it takes you longer, that is no problem. Slow and steady is much better than quick and fast. So remember, just keep turning your hoop so you can rotate and make nice angles for your hand. And then when you are done, you will have a lovely pattern and be ready to go. Now at this point, I suggest leaving your hoop exactly like this. Just stitch with your fabric inside your hoop this direction. That way none of your lines get warped and everything is perfect. And then when you are done, you'll take your fabric out of your hoop and return the pretty side to the front side to then display it, or to then make it into a pillow or whatever else your heart desires. If you see any of my videos and I'm stitching on this side, it's simply for video purposes to make it easier for you to see what's going on. So I would leave your hoop exactly like this and you are ready to start stitching.